There are some really weird tombs in El-Marra, right next to the royal graves. They're at the highest point of the city, looking down over the plains of northern Syria. They've got offerings to the dead, spouted pots, and sacrifices of puppies. The bodies are all facing west, just like the royals. Their architecture is just as elaborate as the royal tombs. But when archaeologists looked inside, they found donkeys. Okay, to be fair, these weren't ordinary donkeys. They were kunga, the offspring of a female domesticated donkey and a male Syrian wild ass. And kunga were the luxury cars of ancient Mesopotamia, about 5,000 years ago. While normal donkeys worked with ploughs on farms, kunga pulled ceremonial chariots for kings, priests and gods. The kings of Ebla would buy tons of kunga from the special breeding facilities at Nagar, and then send them as gifts to other kings. Having access to kunga marked you as a legitimate royal, recognised across the land. And since they were hybrids, they were sterile, so you couldn't do kunga piracy. But why would the kunga themselves be buried like royals? You might think, oh, they've probably been sacrificed. And that's not uncommon in this area. Sometimes an important person dies and a bunch of other people and animals get sacrificed so they can be servants in the afterlife. But these particular kunga look like they died of old age or disease. And we actually have some other burials of young, strong kunga arranged in teams of 4. These ones probably were killed as sacrifices. My favourite interpretation of the royal kunga burials comes from the archaeologist Jill Webber, because it reminds me of some stuff I've seen in the modern day. Okay, so this might seem out of nowhere, but give me a moment. Royal funerals are really good at bringing people together. Honestly, royalty in general. Everyone can get involved in royal events, whether that's by attending parades or helping build a pyramid, buying royal wedding merchandise, or complaining about how the real news is getting drowned out. It can be large scale, like how the UK mourned when the Queen died, or small scale. A visiting royal can be really exciting for a small town, even if they're kind of irrelevant. Out of the 10 most watched events on British TV, half of them were royal, and the Queen's coronation inspired people to buy TVs in the first place. It doesn't even have to be a big official event. Royals provide an endless stream of gossip. Earlier this year there was Kategate. Before that, Meghan and Harry were the big controversy. In the 90s, the big stories were about Princess Diana. They're like the weather. Everyone has them in common. I've been talking about the British monarchy partially because it's the one I know the most about, but also because it's a figurehead monarchy. It's not powerful anymore, really. The whole point is to be a symbol that brings the country together. And isn't it kind of cruel to turn a human into a symbol? Especially in hereditary monarchies, where most of its members don't get a choice. Queen Victoria spent her childhood isolated from her peers and denied privacy by her mother, who wanted her weak and easily controlled. She wrote in her youth about being terrified of pregnancy, and suffered what looks like postpartum psychosis and depression. But reproduction is a monarch's duty, so she ended up with 9 children, and continued the cycle of being kind of weird to them. Marrying the right person is a duty too. At least 3 times in the last 100 years, royals have been forced to choose between their duty and a person they wanted to marry. In some cases, the relationships they wanted may have been actively sabotaged. If someone does marry in, though, they've essentially signed away their right to privacy, and their right to complain. And if someone in the family does something legitimately wrong, it'll have to be hidden. Some of this comes from external scrutiny, and some of it comes from self-inflicted pressure. But how do you separate those when your life is public domain? Our last queen had 2 cousins with intellectual disabilities. In the 60s, they were reported as dead by their mother, when actually they'd been placed in an institution where they remained alive for decades. Were they locked away because they threatened the reputation of the royal bloodline and people might cast aspersions on the Queen's own genetic fitness? Or were they hidden so the public couldn't get weird and voyeuristic about them? Most articles I've read lean towards the first. But let's be real, Britain used to be really into freak shows and eugenics. I can see a bit of both. Yeah, they're rich and famous, and I'm not saying they're good people, but most people still think it would suck to be a royal. It's all duty and pressure and doing what's supposedly right rather than what you want. It's honestly pretty dehumanising. We spend a lot of money to keep essentially national pets. And that's the point of the royal kunga, if I've understood Jill Webber correctly at least. Royal funerals are great at bringing people together and showing off how powerful and rich and great the monarchy is. You can use them to increase sympathy for those in control, or as a focus for public attention and emotion. And if what matters isn't the human being but the symbol, then maybe the symbol doesn't always have to be human. And I think they had the right idea, to be honest. Look, I know people say the royal family's good for tourism, but so's London Zoo. It would just be way more fun for everyone if they were donkeys.